Welcome back to Perkins Pipes. Have the good old Peterson Professor here. Oh, do I love this. In some ways, I feel like this almost might be a signature pipe for me. Just love the way it feels, in the mouth. Love the way it holds in the hand. Love the shape. And yeah, we'll be talking about something a tad scholarly today, so the professor seemed the way to go. As always, let's get this guy lit. Let's get to talking. You know, don't do this with every pipe, but just as I'm lighting it, I'll look down in there and you see the red, right, the red glow of the tobacco catching fire. Such a pretty sight. Reminds me of the embers of a campfire, which is so pretty. And I'm a family, and I certainly enjoy good campfire. Well, to take you back again to the Roman poet Catullus. Now, this is not an episode of pipe and verse, because we're not going to get into the poetics of this, really, or at least the meter and all that stuff. But I wanted to share with you another of his poems. I've mentioned him before, lived from 84 to 54 BC. Wrote a total of 116 poems, and many of them, I think I mentioned this before, many of them are about a woman that he loved, whose name was Clodia Metella. Now, she was upper class. She was patrician, married to a man named Quintus Caecilius Metellus. And she was a bit notorious in her time. Notorious for having affairs. And at one point, the Roman orator Cicero referred to her. He couldn't stand her family. Her brother had really done him wrong, and so he took it out on her in one of his speeches and referred to her as being nobilis et nota, noble and well known. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Right. So she was well known. Catullus had an affair with her, and the poems that he wrote about that affair, to her, about her, detail the very beginning, when he first met her, the heights of love, the crash when they clearly had trouble, coming back again, not quite to that fever pitch that it was at the beginning, and then the crash again. And Catullus did not organize those poems chronologically. He scattered them throughout all of the collections. So what scholars have kind of done, gone through and kind of had to hunt and peck and kind of figure out, kind of what was the first, second, third, or what do we think, trace the progression of the relationship. And the first poem that we believe he would have written about her, to her, is poem number 51 in the collection. And you can imagine a scene of a dinner party. I didn't quite say it's a dinner party, but you can imagine such a scene. And he says, Ille ni par esse Deo videtur. That guy seems like a god to me. He said, woo, that's a strange opening line for a poem about a woman to a woman to talk about some dude. Then he repeats the demonstrative pronoun in the second line, ille. Ille, si fas est superare divos. That man, if it is the divine will, seems to surpass the gods. Qui sedens adversus identidem te spectatet audet dulce redentem. That man who's sitting across from you looks at you again and again and listens to you sweetly laughing. Misero quod omnes eripit sensus mihi, a fact which snatches all my senses from miserable me. Nam simul te lesbia aspexi, nihil est super me. For as soon as I have laid eyes on you, Lesbia, we're going to talk about why he calls her Lesbia if her name is Clodia, there is nothing left for me. Lingua sed torpet, my tongue grows numb. Tenuis subartus flamma demanat, a flame drips down beneath my slender limbs. Sonitus suopte tintinat aures, my ears ring with their own sound. Gemina te guntur lumina nocte, the twin lights of my eyes are covered in darkness. And then he has a final stanza addressed to himself. Otium cotule tibi molestums. Leisure, Catullus, is annoying for you. Otio exultas nimiumque gestis. You exult too much in leisure time, and you get too excited. Otium et reges prius et beatas perdit urbes. Leisure has destroyed in the past kings and beautiful cities. Interesting poem. I teach it pretty much every year to my students. So it's reasonable to assume that the man sitting opposite her, listening to her sweetly laughing, is her husband. And this to me is, as I always talk to the students, we'll set the immorality aside for a moment. But this is part of what makes poetry. He could just say, baby, I love you. Right? Ooh, baby, I love your ways every day. Right? You go all Peter Frampton. But that, quite frankly, is prosaic. Right? That's prose. That's just boom, straight communication. Poetry gets us to a point, rather than going straight at it, it comes in from the side. It comes in from a different angle than we were expecting. And he starts off by focusing not on the woman, but her husband. And he says, as far as I'm concerned, your husband is like a god. Scratch that. If the gods would allow it, your husband is better than the gods. He surpasses the gods. He conquers the gods. Why? Because he gets to be with you. Oh, beautiful sentiment. Unfortunately, wrapped up in context of adultery, but okay. What a beautiful way to come at it. First part. Second part. Because what happens to me when I look at you? Oh, baby, I lose everything, right? I lose the ability to talk. My tongue gets numb, right? I start to get get a little hot in here. Get a little flushed, right? Flamma demanat. Flame just drips down beneath my limb. He says, my ears ring with their own sound. And I always do this. And when I teach it, I say, take a moment, plug your ears, and then listen to what you hear, right? So when you close your ears, what do you hear? You hear the rushing of your own blood. You hear your heartbeat. And that's what it is. He said, my heart is going lub-dub, 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 right? And my blood is pounding in my ears. In fact, I almost pass out. My eyes, I can't see. They're covered with night. And then comes the third move in the poem, where he talks to himself. Now, you got to understand the word otium, O-T-I-U-M. We do get the English word otios from that. Otium is the Latin word for leisure, free time. Okay. And you say, well, yeah, sure, Roman toga party, right? Hey, free time. Actually, the traditional Roman virtues said, no, negotium is what you should be after. N-E-G, right, where we get the word negative, negate. Negotium is the Latin word for business. That's the word for business. It's literally lack of leisure, lack of free time. And at least at the time when Catullus was writing, end of the 1st century, we're still at the end. We're in the Republic, although the Republic is coming to an end. We're getting ready to move into the Roman Empire. You still have people talking about the traditional values. And even among the upper class, they pay lip service to the idea of, yes, hard work is very important, right? But they have slaves doing all their work for them. But at any rate, that's the virtue. And he's kind of shakes himself out a little bit, and he says, Catullus, talking to himself, he says, free time is bad for you. Okay? You get a little too excited in the free time here. Because when you got nothing else to do, you're sitting looking over at this woman who's another man's wife. You're falling in love with somebody else that you got no right to. And he reminds himself from history, he says, in the past, leisure has destroyed kings. Whole cities have been brought down because of leisure time. And then the poem ends. So you really have 3 movements, 3 little acts in this drama. First, talking about the husband, how lucky he is because he gets to sit across from her, his own reaction to her, and then the recognition, this is pretty tough for me. Right. Now, why does he call her lesbia? He wanted, obviously, needs to hide her identity. She's married to somebody, for heaven's sake. So if you count out the letters, Clodia, her name, C-L-O-D-I-A, 6 letters, Lesbia, L-E-S-B-I-A, 6 letters. Okay, so those 2 names are going to fit in the poetry together. The meter, the form of poetry he chose for this first poem about her was a meter used by the Greek poet Sappho, one of the few female authors that we know from the ancient world, in which she had talked about someone that she loved. Sappho was from the island of Lesbos, capital L-E-S-B-O-S. So what Catullus does, he takes the meter, the poetic structure, of a poet from Lesbos, who was a woman, takes that into a name, Lesbia, and uses that to identify his woman, Clodia. He never calls her Clodia. He always calls her by the pseudonym Lesbia. Now, people figured this out. This wasn't, the most stellar code in the world. People did figure this out. And yes, if you're thinking that word sounds a little familiar, does it sound a little bit like lesbian? Well, first off, anybody from the island of Lesbos is a lesbian by nature, right? You're from America, you're an American. You're from Germany, you're a German, right? You're from Lesbos, you are a lesbian. So why does that word have the meaning that it does today? Well, because Sappho was a female homosexual. So that's why that word means what it was. So a little etymology lesson for you there. But just a beautifully structured poem. Again, obviously, people who know me from this channel would know that I don't approve of the content. I don't approve of his fooling around, or hers. But it is a beautiful, beautiful poem. I hope you have somebody or maybe you have had somebody about whom you could say something similar. All right. And you could change it up to a modern context, right? Oh, fortunate the car that gets to take you to work every day. Right? Because when I see you, I blah, 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 blah. Just some beautiful thoughts there. So, curious what you think about the poem, as always. I'd love to hear your comments there. And as Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Oh, as I like to say in Latin, Parva ago ut tandem, nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.